I'm Richard Paul. Welcome to the South Valley Press, and I thank you for joining me here for today's conversation. It's about news deserts. What is a news desert? I think the name or the description is in the name. However, I want to go to play a little clip for you. We're going to spend about 2, maybe 3 minutes on this next clip. That'll kind of set the tone for today's conversation, and I'll catch you on the other side.
The past couple of weeks are showing once again just how tough the business of news is right now, with layoffs by digital upstarts and by the country's largest newspaper chain, Gannett. BuzzFeed laid off 15% of its staff, while the Huffington Post and Yahoo News cut hundreds of jobs under their new owner, Verizon. Many are more worried that a hedge fund-backed group known for gutting newsrooms might buy Gannett. That would potentially be an even bigger hit to local news coverage nationwide. All of this has led to the growth of so-called news deserts, places where there is limited access to news outlets. For a look at the fallout from all this, we're joined now by Steve Cavendish. He's editor of the Nashville Banner. That is a nonprofit news startup that he is in the process of relaunching after the paper by the same name folded in 1998. And Penny Abernathy of the University of North Carolina. She's written a major report about the shrinking of local news organizations and how it increases our country's political polarization. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining us. Steve Cavendish, I'm going to start with you. You wrote the other day that what's going on right now for journalists is a bloodbath. Is it really that bad?
Well, it has been over a long period of time. It's over the last couple of decades, we've seen journalism jobs around the country be cleaved off at a rate like either coal miners or steel workers or fishermen, and those are not what you would call thriving industries. Journalism has had revenue problems for years, and we're starting to see as print is really sort of wiped out, that the conversion over to digital for many of these properties, many of these newspapers, just isn't the same. And so we're seeing with it a lot of jobs lost.
Penny Abernathy, you agree it's that bad? And if so, what's driving this?
Well, I think there are two things we need to look at. One is the total loss of newspapers, because newspapers are often the prime, if not the sole source of news and information, especially in small and mid-sized communities. So over the last decade and a half, we've seen 1,800 newspapers disappear off the landscape of the U.S. But there's also the equally troubling situation that we have with the surviving newspapers, where we've lost more than half of the newspaper newsroom journalists that we had just in 2008. We're calling that the rise of the ghost newspaper, in which papers are basically shells of their former selves. And as Steve suggests, it's being driven by a couple of things. One is the rapid decline of advertising, especially print advertising, and the inability of news organizations to make up for that in any kind of digital revenue, be that subscription revenue, be that advertising revenue.
Steve Cavendish, a lot of conversation about the role of these organizations that have become so powerful over the last decade, Facebook, Google. What is their role in all this?
Well, as newspapers have tried to become digital operations and try to sell digital advertising, the problem is that they get into these markets, and Google and Facebook have, between the two of them, about 80% of the digital ad market. And so what's left really pushes down on what they can make what you can make as an organization. And so the print dollars that many news chains have walked away from have been replaced by digital dimes or even digital pennies. And that replacement is reflected in the number of jobs that have been lost.
And Penny Abernathy, what does that mean for news consumers, people who have counted on, whether it's a newspaper or something else, for news and information?
Well, it means the rise of news deserts, in which residents in communities, hundreds of communities, even thousands in this country, have very limited access to the sort of news and information that's been the lifeblood of our democracy. Everything from when and where to vote to topics such as education, health, emergency and safety information that we need.
Okay, thank you for sticking with me. That was Judy Goodall with PBS interviewing Steve Cavendish and Penny Abernathy. Penny's one of the leading authorities on news deserts and has been studying and speaking on this topic for quite some time. She's also authored a book. But the problem's quite serious. The In addition to Penny's work, there's also PEN America that's done some pretty recent large studies on the topic of news deserts. And I think it was outlined well in the video, but to underline it, understand that a news desert happens even in places where there's access to plenty of news. It's just it lacks the local news and content that you would expect from your local community newspaper. So PEN America has done a study that focused just over the last 15 years, and some of the numbers that was reported there in that conversation we just watched are that I believe that video is 4 years old. It's gotten worse, and unfortunately, the outlook is that it will continue to get worse. And it's having some really probably it's having some tragic effects that go almost completely unnoticed by the average Joe, and that's why it's important for me to outline that we do live in a news desert here in South Valley, and to outline the issue for you and help you to understand that this is a problem in our community. Obviously, I do propose South Valley Press could be at the heart of a solution for us, or at least the beginning to a solution and to a better outcome than what we've seen with so many local news organizations. But the bottom line in the reports from PEN America, a nonprofit organization that's studying the topic, is just the bottom line is that Americans are just not adequately informed. Because of this, they're less likely to engage in political and civic life. Local news outlets across the country are shrinking and shuttering at an alarming rate. So if you look at these studies that have come out in the last few years, what they found is that if you look at just newspapers, forget radio and television and any other news organization and digital, if you look at newspapers alone, have lost $35 billion in ad revenue in the last 15 years. So let's think about that just for a moment. $35 billion in lost ad revenue in just the last 15 years by newspapers alone. Elon Musk purchased Twitter for $44 billion. So $35 billion lost in ad revenue in just 15 years. That's not a loss of business, that's loss of an industry. Over 2,000 local newspapers have shut down. So I think they had the number of 1,800 in that video. Now over 2,000, and it's significantly over 2,000 now. Gaining momentum, have lost newspapers have been lost in the last 15 years. 1,000 more on top of those 2,000. 1,000 more are ghost papers, which I think she used that phrase as well. A ghost paper is a newspaper that still exists, and it seems that it's continued to serve a community. However, the content inside no longer serves the community as it once did. You'll find more and more regional, state, and even national news coverage, more general topic stuff than specific stuff to your community. So they just, the ghost paper is just a newspaper that still exists. It just doesn't serve the needs of the community the same as it once did. And there's over 1,000 more of those in the last 15 years. And that number, I think, is also increasing at an alarming rate. So these, like I said, they're shells of their former selves. They do very little of the original reporting as they once did. And like I said, Americans just are not adequately informed. They're less likely to engage politically or in civic life. The, uh, the outcome is there's fewer people that vote, so you have less voter turnout, and so that's important to know what's going on locally, and people don't realize what goes on when people aren't informed and not involved in the conversation of what's going on at your town hall. You don't know what is going on in terms of growth, and that's a big subject, always sometimes even a contentious subject here in South Valley, particularly Kuna, where I live. Are you pro-growth? Are you against growth? What's your stand on that? Are you okay with the next big subdivision going in, or would you like to have a word about it, with your local official? I don't know. I might be pessimistic, but I believe that much fewer than 10 people out of 10 people would even be able to name one member of their city council. I bet you less than half of the people you ask in our community could name even one. Probably most could name the mayor because he's a little more high profile, but I'll bet you not everyone could. And so why does it matter? Why do newspapers or news organizations such as that matter so much? Is because newspapers still provide the bulk of the original reporting at the local level. So yes, you have your radio station you listen to on the way home from work, or your television you watch in the evening, and watching the evening news potentially. One thing is how we consume our news is quite different now as well. So oftentimes, particularly the millennial generation, they get a large percentage of their news from social media, which probably ain't the best idea. But that's where they get it. That's where they enjoy convenience, that particular group, and that is where it's most convenient. If news is placed in their purview within social networking, that's how they find it. So that's not a bad thing, but unfortunately, the local coverage about the local town council and what's going on just isn't there for them. Because newspapers do provide the bulk of the original reporting at the local level, they drive what is said on that radio station on the way home from work, and what's on that newscast in the evening. Newspapers have always tended to drive those conversations, and you'll often find when you visit a television network's news channel's website and you read some of the articles they post, it'll say previously reported in in such and such news publication. So newspapers drive the conversation. Not all, of course, but they are the leading provider of original reporting, so that those conversations are what drives the conversations online and on the radio and on television. And so I mentioned the town council. Without newspapers, we lose that watchdog function. That's so important in our democracy. Without that creates a wider path for corruption and abuse and fraud. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody locally. In fact, I think we're pretty well served considering. Unfortunately, I don't think our local officials, and when I say that, I mean in pretty much every jurisdiction within South Valley, I don't believe they're getting the support that they need to guide their decisions. And it's true. It's been studied. Without newspapers, without somebody watching the hen house, there is a wider path for corruption and abuse and fraud. And what happens then is government corruption. With any type of corruption comes increase in costs. Officials conduct themselves with less integrity and efficiency. That's been found in these reports that I've been privy to. And again, fewer people turn out to vote, and the ones that do, what's left of the people that still are active in their civic duty and voting and such, oftentimes they are voting tribally. And what I mean by that is they always vote a certain way with a certain group of people with a certain interest. We want a wider body politic and more people to help make some of these big important decisions that move our community forward. So that outlines today's conversation, basically, or that is our conversation. It's just to help you understand what a news desert is, and to understand that we live in one here in South Valley. I hope you understand that the problem is critical and it's important to our democracy. That I hope that as time moves forward and as we roll out South Valley Press, that you'll join in the discussion more later on and help us create something new and something fresh and something different. And you know, I don't just point at the problem. I believe I have a solution. And part of that solution is my own effort and my own work, my own contribution to build and provide public service that will give people not only access but better ways of sharing their news. So that's what I look forward to sharing with my community, and I need your help. I certainly would never be able to achieve this on my own without the support of local business and people like yourself that are interested and concerned and love this community we call South Valley. Hey, I just want to briefly sign off and say thank you very much for taking some of your time and spending it with me here today learning about news deserts and discussing the topic. I'd like to hear from you. My email address is real easy. It's editor@southvalleypress.com. Please feel welcome to visit southvalleypress.com. Have a look around if you're so inclined. Register as a community member. It's free. And I think you will be excited to see what we are going to be able to deliver for the local community going forward. But I think registration and getting in there and seeing what your own personal dashboard looks like and how that whole thing works, I think it may surprise you. I hope it does, and I hope it's a pleasant surprise at that. Before you go, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Do the thing, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell if you're so inclined, and if you don't mind, can I ask you a small favor? Will you like this video? That way we can look forward to a little better profile for our YouTube edition of the South Valley Press, and it'll help give us a kick towards the right direction. Once again, my name is Richard Paul. Thank you for tuning in, and have a wonderful day.